Hello. First of all, I need to say I'm sorry I didn't advertise this live as usual. As you might notice, I am not in my usual spot. I'm actually at the moment in the centre of Reykjavik at the museum of Iceland. So if you hear noises behind me, it's because I'm in the cafeteria. It's fairly empty, so I thought I was quite safe, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to join you today. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't advertise live. But here I am. So good to be with you. I have an hour here before the cafe closes, so you may hear people warning that the cafe is going to close and I need to leave. So I will be here for an hour. Hopefully we will get through that. But I have had to think about the kind of things that I want to talk about. So I'm going to do my usual thing of talking to you about a topic, and then we'll have time for questions as well at the end. And the topic I want to talk about today is something that, having had a kind of a baptism of fire with TikTok recently, I've decided that I'm going to join the world of TikTok, and I started making videos on TikTok. And they've been a lot of fun. I've had quite a lot of reactions. In fact, on one of the videos that's over some crazy amount of like 200,000 views in less than a week, which is absolutely unheard of for me on any other platform. I got so many comments that I couldn't actually reply to them all, and so I thought some of the things I did see come through as I sort of flick through things, there were quite a few things and questions that were raised. So the actual video I posted here on YouTube and on Instagram too, and it was about hard languages. What's a hard language? What's difficult for us to learn? And basically, there is no one single answer for that. It's depends on so many factors, who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, your motivation, all sorts of things, right? I went into just your linguistic background and what makes a language hard from that aspect. Now, there were a number of comments that I saw coming through, things like, just get to the point. Why can't you just tell me the answer? Why do you have to have this whole spiel about this depends on this and the other factors involved, and some languages are easier because of this and because of that? And it really made me think. There's this race for knowledge, and you see it repeated not just for questions like that, but also for language learning itself. People are in a rush to learn a language. They seem to really want to do it quickly. And this race and thirst for knowledge, whilst in some ways can be admirable, it can be something that I think drives us forward. There are other circumstances where I think it's actually a little bit dangerous because we don't listen to the reality and we don't take in all of the information and understand the world in a patient and systematic manner. And I think it's really important that we try and understand what's going on and what's at play, and why isn't there a simple answer to this? The interesting thing is, when you try and give a simple answer to a very open question like what's an easy language or what's a hard language, that's so open, you have to maybe reframe it. So another video I made a little bit later was what's an easy language from the point of view of an English speaker. And so from that, I can give a very concrete answer. The easiest language, I believe, is the closest one to English, which is Scots. And that's what I said. There are also people who will disagree with that. They would say, okay, will you talk about creolized languages, things like Jamaican patois or Jamaican Creole, for example, might be one that would be another answer. And I completely agree, that's a valid answer as well. There are other valid answers based on materials available. I could go down that road as well, of course, because for Scots, there isn't that much available to learn Scots as a non-Scots speaker, as a second language. But for example, Afrikaans would probably be my second answer in terms of materials available. The language is simple for an English speaker, and it's no gender, verb forms are simple, all those kinds of things. All of these things are dependent on so many aspects. So when I see sort of the frustration of it, just get to the point. I also think then, well, maybe that person's not really in it for the knowledge. They're more in it for just, I want a 2-second answer, and that's it. Unfortunately, in life, there are very few 2-second answers. And this is something that I can draw a parallel with for language learning generally. So I run these language learning groups and sessions where I talk through, it's language learning therapy basically, and we talk through lots of different things. And one of the things that comes up is deciding on languages, speed of learning, concentration on being able to focus on one aspect of things at one time. And I absolutely get that these are all very tricky aspects of language learning, and I would absolutely invite you to comment and ask me the things that are important to you, because there may be things that I can talk about in future sessions where we can explore and see what we can do. I'm not sure if anybody's trying to write anything on YouTube, but I'm not seeing any comments come through yet, which is unusual. And I'm guessing that the chat is blocked for some reason. So please, I'm sorry if you can't. If you write later, I will do my best to come back to them. Otherwise, on Instagram, I have obviously you can also write a question. Oh, something's come through on YouTube now. So there we go. We'll see. Hopefully it works. Hello. Thanks for trying that out for me. I appreciate it. So the question of this thirst for very quick knowledge, for example, this race to know things, is super interesting to me, because I think in the first instance, okay, languages in a very short amount of time is what sells products, okay? So, I mean, Benny hit on an amazing idea when he came up with Fluent in 3 months. Excellent, just an absolutely excellent title for the mass market. It works really well as something for marketing jargon, for be able to put out there. Absolutely brilliant for selling things to the public. Benny himself is a very realistic person, actually a very nice person. Whenever I meet him, he's always very sweet with me. He's always very kind, always very pleasant to be around, and I enjoy his company immensely. And he is the first to say, obviously, Fluent in 3 months is a good thing to say, because it sticks. It's easy. It trips off the tongue. It stays in your ear. It's a nice title, right? But is it realistic? And this is kind of where I want to get to. Online, we see people like me, and I'm guilty of this too, who come out with these videos in different languages, or appearing to learn a language quickly. And some people will follow that and go like, oh, that's amazing. Some people will see it as the reality that it is. Other people will see it as, oh, he's faking it. Well, everyone's right. Not that I'm faking it, but there are certain things that you show online and people see in social media, not just me, but generally in social media. We show the amazing stuff and we show the really awful stuff, and the kind of mundane bits in between, the bits that we think are not going to be interesting for people to hear about or read about or follow, we leave out. So we show the highs and the lows. And so this is kind of what we see on social media, this up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And so when you see me doing something like, for example, the Estonian challenge for a month, you see the up. You see me speaking Estonian, doing the interview. Oh, wow, he's learnt another language. Isn't that amazing? What you don't see is me a year later, and my Estonian's actually gone down from that level. Because I'm not clearly going to make a video showing me speaking bad Estonian, not because I'm afraid of doing that. I can admit it quite happily to you here that my Estonian would not be as good as it was when I did the interview, and I'm absolutely comfortable doing that. The reason I don't make a video doing that is because it's also a mundane thing. So, does that make me a fake? No. Does it make it that I'm showing you the good and then not showing the mundane in between? Absolutely. And that's basically what we do online. We show these two variants. We very rarely see the bits in between. Now, I want to sort of talk again, and I've spoken about this before, but I think it's really important to labor the point. And when it comes to language learning, and it takes time. This rush for knowledge, this rush to speak a language fluently or to even communicate in a language, sometimes when we've got work, when we've got studies, when we've got family, when we've got other things going on, and we're not using the language all the time, we can't rush it. It just is not possible. So let me give you an example. I've been studying Cornish now for 2 years. 2 years, okay? 2 years of Cornish. Right now in Cornish, I can have a fairly nice, basic, but nice conversation with mistakes, probably around about an A2 level. Okay. With an A2 level, you can get by in talking about yourself, your daily routine, what you do, what you like, what you don't like, what you think, some ideas, all those kinds of things. You'll make mistakes, you'll have gaps in your vocabulary, as I do in Cornish, and make lots of mistakes, which I do. Does it matter? Well, that depends on how you feel. If you think that 2 years is a long time to get to that level, well, potentially it is if you are able to dedicate full-time study to that, full-time hours to doing that. As it is, my Cornish it's a language related to Welsh, it's a sister language of Welsh, which I do speak, and the thing is that to get to the level I've got to now, I've been studying that language for maybe 4-5 hours a week, which I think is it's a fairly good chunk of time for a language when you're working full time and you've got a family and you're doing all other things as well. So the question I ask you is, what do you expect for your languages? Where do you expect to be? Do you need to revise those expectations? Are you in a race to learn languages? If so, why are you in a race? What's making you rush? Is it because we're comparing ourselves to people online when they're at the highs? And that's kind of where I think we are going wrong. We see people online at the height of what they're doing. They've just done something, sort of some crazy feat of language learning, and we compare ourselves to those people. That's where I think we make a mistake. Because comparing ourselves, our normal everyday life, to the high is not realistic, even to our own highs. So for me to compare myself to me doing a month of intensive Estonian study last year and just basically studying Estonian for a month or two, to compare my normal sort of way of learning languages to that is not fair. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to anyone for me to do that. So I want to be very open and say, I don't even do that. I don't compare myself to myself when I'm learning other languages. I don't compare my language learning now to when I learned German, being in Germany, living in a German family, studying German 8 hours a day, speaking it constantly. I can't compare myself to that. So anyone who has an expectation of me learning a language super quickly, unfortunately, that's not true. It might feel that that's the way it comes across sometimes, and I want to kind of start to level that out a bit. I want to add some of the mundane in there for you, because I think it's important to have sort of a bite of the reality of what it actually involves learning a language and speaking a different language and normal everyday life and existence. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I hope by talking about this in a very open and honest way helps you to see this reality. And I hope that my insights into, for example, what I've been doing now, I'm very happy to answer more questions on this, obviously. But I hope that just opening up helps you to feel there's a bite of reality there for you too. I'd love to hear more from you. So let me go to the questions and the comments, and I'll do my best to answer, and we'll see where we get. So hello, hey Tiffany, good to see you. How are you enjoying your trip? Eva, good to see you. Eres mi ídolo, hermano. Muchas gracias, Cristian. Muchas gracias. A ver, let me see. Let's see. Okay. Seeing lots of people coming in. Hello from Brazil. Hello. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Remember, you can always reach out to me if you've got a specific language question, and this is the kinds of things I deal with in the groups and the private sessions. We talk about you, and we talk about your language, and we talk about your needs, your objectives, your goals, how to achieve them, because language learning is a very personal journey. I don't think that every single way we work, that is something we can copy and paste onto everyone else, unfortunately. You're currently in Prague. Wow, having a good time. Okay. The way I compare myself to myself is to remind myself how much I've learned. Excellent, Tiffany. That's really nice. Yeah. Reminding yourself, stopping and looking back. This is why I like goals sometimes, like having a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month goals, short-term goals, because you can look back and you can really see what you've learned and how you've developed as a person in your knowledge, in your expertise, in your awareness, all these kinds of things. Really, really good. Enjoy Prague, by the way. It's one of my favorite cities. I love it. I love Prague. Hey brother, love from India. Nice to see you. I've always been a spoken person, so starting off with my German language thing, and I can understand almost everything, but face difficulty in writing and speaking. Yeah, it can be tricky. Look, you need to practice. If you want to improve your writing in a language, or your understanding or your speaking, whichever aspect you feel you need to practice and you want to improve in, if you don't do anything with that part of the language, then you're not going to improve, unfortunately. It's something that you have to dedicate time to. So what the most common thing that I see is people come to me and they say, well, I read all the time and I do this all the time, and you're becoming good at reading, and you're becoming someone who reads in that language, and you may understand it well, but reading doesn't. I know I'm probably going to get some hate for this, but reading does not necessarily mean that you're going to then speak the language a lot better. Sometimes it can improve, but if you're not practicing your speaking and you're not practicing your listening, I'm sorry to say that just reading it will improve your reading skills and your awareness and ability in the language on those passive levels. It might not even work for the passive level of listening to the same degree. It may do, it may not do. It depends on the language. It depends how different the language is when it's spoken and written as well. Like, for example, if you could read in Finnish, right, and you're only reading sort of formal Finnish, and then you hear Finnish people speaking on the street, it's basically almost two different languages. I mean, spoken Finnish and written Finnish are very, very different. Like the formal way of writing and the way of speaking Finnish, very, very different. So actually, you can read as much as you want, but unless you're doing listening and with people on the street, your understanding of the common colloquial way of speaking Finnish is not necessarily going to improve. And that's true for many languages, even languages that are close with written and spoken forms. Sometimes the spoken variety could be very fast. It can sound very quick, the words run together. When it's on the page, we see the separate words more easily, unless you're learning Thai and then it just is these long sentences with gaps for the end of the sentence, then that might take some training on its own. But generally speaking, that's sort of how it works. But yeah, you need to train the things that you want to learn, and that's the only way, unfortunately, that you get better at it. How do you learn to speak a language faster when you're already advanced? When you say faster, Vlad, what do you mean? Do you mean like your speed of speech, like to speak a language quickly? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean just generally speaking a language, but learning to speak it in a faster amount of time, more quickly in terms of time? I just want to make sure I've got the understanding right there. You live the more, yeah, thank you. You like seeing more of a mundane, forgetting words and grammar, mixing languages. I feel like many videos online edit all that out and create an unrealistic expectation. Absolutely, Ewan. Absolutely. This is where I feel as well. There are definitely some creators that try to show the ups and the downs more so that it kind of evens out. Lindy is usually good with doing things like that. There are other people that do admit to these things, and I'm not saying that people don't. I just think that it does tend to be the ups and the downs more than the in between. And I don't know, how do you make it interesting? That's the thing as well, isn't it? Right, on social media, it's making it interesting. I think maybe just during these lives, I get a chance to talk about these things in a very frank way. So maybe this is the format that I can use to do this, and I hope that doing this with you live now, and this is kind of a bit of a look into the conversations, or the types of conversations I have with people who join my groups and join my live sessions, so that we can really look at the issues that they face on an individual level and work through them. And the cool thing about the groups is that what I find, we as individuals within the group, we can understand and sort of recognize some of the same issues, and it makes you feel better about the things going on with you because it's more realistic. Yeah. Let me see. I'm struggling to learn French. I know. I feel you're praying, Christian. It is very often a struggle to learn, and it can be for many reasons. So, I mean, what do you particularly feel is that your struggle at the moment, Christian, with learning French? Write it in the chat on YouTube, and I'll have a look and see if we can do some troubleshooting. Okay, Vaughan says, I have great memory, might have ADHD, and would you recommend for an approach learning language if memory is not the best? Memory, this is the thing, right? So our perception of memory, our perception of what we can and can't do, actually is we're subjective very often to, well, not very often, almost 100% of the time, we have a very subjective view of our own abilities. And sometimes that's in an overly optimistic way. Sometimes it's in a more pessimistic way. Sometimes we just need to sort of bring things together and see a more sort of meet in the middle, I guess, with this. Realistically, with memory things, there are certain memory techniques that you can use for learning words more quickly. So that would be, for example, making stories out of words, focusing in on the separate syllables, and listening to the sounds, trying to attach stories to the sounds that have maybe meaning for other words that you know in another language. Those kinds of things help you to put things together, so that when you then try to remember, and the remembering a story and remembering something like that often helps. Now, if we're talking about lots and lots of words, clearly that takes time, but it takes time generally to learn words and languages anyway. I find looking into etymology and explaining etymology to other people is a really good way to help to bring words into your head, internalize them, and work through those kinds of things. But the only way you're going to really learn language is if you repeat it very often, a lot of times, make mistakes, and repeat the process again and again and again and again and again and again. That's the only way it goes in. I mean, it's the same with our first language. It's the only way it goes in. I mean, we forget how many times we got things wrong, made mistakes, said the wrong things, people laughed. We kind of just, as children, because we didn't have the same kinds of social anxieties or social issues or history with our peers or other people in society, we just got on with it. We just stood up, walked on, okay, got it wrong, now I'll get it right. Or I'll get it wrong another 50 times and then I'll get it right. We just carry on. This is what happens. And we need to do that as adults too. It often feels a lot harder though. So yeah, that's my real advice on this. Let me see. Okay, I can see another question here. When I speak French, I usually make pauses in the middle of a sentence. that native speakers wouldn't do as much. How do I improve this aspect? Thank you. Vlad, this is where fillers are really useful. So many people will talk about fillers in a language, things that languages go, and they're parts of the language that are natural to make or say or do or have in your conversation, but learning the ones that the speakers of the language use will help you to get time to collect your thoughts, to move on to the next aspect. Learning chunks of language as well, so language in context will often be a really good way of doing that. So you know one chunk, you say the chunk, you can use a filler, and then you think about what else you want to say. But getting into a pattern of saying things that you want to say. Somebody said to me at one point, and I remember this comment, this question, if I learn phrases, am I cheating at language learning? No, you're not cheating. We don't learn as children, we don't learn individual words necessarily as children. What we do is we learn language in context, we repeat things that go together, and certain language, even expressions in language, get fossilized in this way. So the words no longer are separate, they're only used in certain contexts. So you can learn languages in that way too, and that helps to improve your fluency because you've learned it as a set phrase, things that you want to say, for example, and then you can use these fillers and then move on to the next thing you want to say. That's kind of how I see it working. Listen to the rhythm of the language as well and see where people stop, start, and you can put pauses in where maybe they wouldn't normally go in, but you can listen to do it in a way that speakers of that language would do naturally. So people don't all speak like me in English, but it doesn't mean that my English is any less authentic, if that makes sense to you. I mean, there are so many little things that you can do, but for French in particular, you've got some really good creators on Instagram and on YouTube and on TikTok and all over the place who are great to follow for languages. And I saw one of them make a thing about French fillers just a few weeks ago, in fact. So you'll find things like that, and you can learn them. Yeah. Okay. I like to read histories, novels, and firstly, because I like hearing it. Secondly, because I find it processing better. What helps with articulation as well. Fantastic. Zara, I'm learning Korean and I have more than 2 years. I am around C1. Wow, C1 after 2 years of Korean, that's impressive. I don't think I would be at C1 in Korean after maybe 20 years, to be honest. But I don't know this level is good or not. C1 level is entirely unnecessary for most common communication. It's something that you would be looking at if you were teaching children in Korea at school, for example. That would be more of a C1 type level where you're explaining the language to native Korean speaking children or native level Korean speaking children. That's kind of a C1, C2 level. So these are very high levels and they're rarely used for most day-to-day speech. So the level I'm talking to you right now in English is around about a B2. Just to give you some context, most of my videos in English are going to be around about a B2 level. So a C1 level of language is going to be more than that. Yeah. Let me see. I'm currently learning Polish, and I wondered if you had any advice on bridging the gap between listening to slow robotic conversation, native level speed of conversations. Wow, okay. Good question. Actually, do you know what? I think that the good thing about Polish is that you have, I mean, they love the lector in Poland, the guy who, usually a guy who dubs, goes over the voice, right, and reads what people are saying on TV and on films and whatever else. They have a very clear pronunciation. And on TikTok, there is a Polish lector who reads things and does like little short sound bites in Polish, where you hear the English. It's super, super cool to watch him do it. And those kinds of things actually in Polish, I think, are pretty good. Other things that you could do is maybe look at audiobooks with the text so that you can follow along as well. Look, I mean, Link has that kind of stuff. So you could even find it and put it in Link. That might be a good way of doing it. Hi, it's a great honor. I've got a question. I've been studying English for 2 years. How much speaking practice should I do to improve it even more quicker? The more you do in the language, the more chance you've got of improving quickly. Look, I mean, when you're talking about quickly, I think you're talking about weeks and months, right? Now, the difference between somebody learning a language quickly and not quickly is the amount of hours that you do within a given time. And that difference is really determined by if you study, say, 4 hours to 8 hours a day. Afterwards, your brain is going to be concentrating and thinking about the language even after your study period. So that's why you seemingly learn the language more quickly. It's not really to do with the weeks and months, it's more to do with the intensity. However, and this is where I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the more intensely you learn a language, the more language you go through in a very short amount of time, and therefore the more time you need to keep recycling the language, cycling back through all of those things that you've been learning so that you get the practice and get it firm and lodged in your brain. So the more you do, the better it is, but you also need to be able to carry on doing it. Okay, back to YouTube. Okay, let me see. Okay, educate children. I suspect that many people who didn't learn another language as children may, as adults, feel a need to make up for lost time, and thus progress doesn't feel fast enough, no matter what. Educate the children. I absolutely agree with you. A lot of this is more psychological and than it is anything else. A lot of the issues we face, in fact, learning almost anything, but particularly languages as adults, is more to do with our own individual psychological makeup and our experiences growing up, our experiences as adults, our self-image, self-perception, our surroundings, much more than it is to do with the learning. Knowing our learning style, having been imprinted on from our formal education, from school, we have perceptions of how we should and shouldn't learn, or how we should and shouldn't behave, and this all does impact on our learning later on in life. And I see people, for example, want to take languages on as though it's Latin and it's a living language, and they study it like they would study Latin at school or ancient Greek at school, with just tables of declensions or conjugations. And of course, they can be interesting and important to understand the mechanics behind how the language works. However, if you don't learn to use the language in a very natural way, the language is not alive in your head. You're learning it as though it's a topic or a subject that isn't normally spoken in the way a language is. A language is definitely quite different. So yeah, I agree with you. A lot goes in as adults. Muchas personas influentes siempre usan la palabra misma en su vídeo. Es más difícil cuando habla en vivo con otra persona y cuando habla en contextos diferentes. Eso sí que es verdad. Eso sí que es verdad. Si estás hablando, por ejemplo, con otra persona durante el día, por ejemplo, yo estoy aquí en Reykjavik ahora mismo y hablo con la gente, pues, y nunca se sabe cómo van a hablar contigo, qué van a decir. Y hablando así, de repente, sobre algún tema, no sé, o lo que sea, sí que es una cosa más complicada, y también hay que aprender cómo abordar un tema, por ejemplo, hablar con una persona y utilizar el idioma en un contexto más real, más dinámico, y eso sí que cuesta mucho más. Y la verdad es que es así. Y hay que tener también experiencias así, hablando y hablando por los codos, hablando mucho, para que tenga esa experiencia utilizando el idioma en un contexto así, siempre que están moviendo, cambiando durante todo el día y utilizando el idioma porque es una cosa viva, ¿no? Y eso es la cosa con idioma. Tienes razón. A ver. I use media music videos repeated to make them much more familiar. Absolutely, Tiffany. If you make things sort of you use things if you use things over and over again and you get used to them, then they become things that you can start to manipulate. I agree. When I was at university in the UK and I was learning Italian, I used to listen to a lot of Italian music to really help to speak and use Italian and speak quickly. And that's actually another good way of getting used to speaking quickly is singing a lot. I found that really useful. And it was really cool. It was really cool. So I did that with Italian. Loads. I can sing so many songs in Italian, but I'm not going to do that now. I won't subject you to that. Antonio, it's an honor to be here. You're very kind and very welcome. Thank you for joining. Okay, Christian, I think you made a really good point last week that learning slowly is a great way to go about it. Perhaps it allows a deeper foundation of the language in the long run. Absolutely, Christian. It really does. That's kind of why I think it's important to talk about this topic quite a lot, and to say it in different ways and to present it in different ways and to go about it using different vocabulary, different language, things that will attract or be more interesting and more relevant to every individual. So this is kind of why I wanted to come back to this topic from a slightly different angle, because I see it's still something that people come back to and it makes sense. And so, yeah, thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. Hallo Richard, was würdest du empfehlen, wenn du jemanden schon 5, 6 oder sogar mehr Sprachen spricht? Wie viel Zeit sollte man jeder Sprache in der Woche oder im Monat widmen? Also, eine sehr gute Frage. Es kommt darauf an, was für eine Sprache das ist. Also, wenn es zum Beispiel so Sprachen sind wie für mich zum Beispiel Deutsch und Holländisch, also Niederländisch benutze ich eigentlich sehr wenig, aber ich habe in Rotterdam gewohnt und ich benutze die Sprache immer noch so online quasi so zum Lesen und so weiter. Und Deutsch spreche ich so nicht tagtäglich, würde ich sagen, ich meine für meine Arbeit, aber ziemlich häufig und auch zu Hause mit meiner Tochter. Wir sprechen auch auf Deutsch. Und deswegen finde ich, dass ich eigentlich nicht so häufig auf Niederländisch sprechen muss, um mein Niederländisch zu behalten und nicht zu vergessen. Also, weil die Sprachen so nah aneinander sind, das ist auch eine Hilfe. Wenn es so eine Sprache so wäre wie Finnisch zum Beispiel, also ich habe Finnisch einmal an der Uni in Helsinki habe ich das gelernt, studiert eigentlich an der Uni, und die Sprache spreche ich nie. Und deshalb habe ich die Sprache eigentlich sozusagen vergessen. Ich kann die Sprache nicht mehr sprechen. Also es kommt darauf an, was für eine Sprache das ist, wie gut man die Sprache eigentlich sprechen kann und ob die Sprache eigentlich immer dabei ist, entweder passiv oder aktiv, ob man die Sprache eigentlich benutzen kann oder eine Sprache, die sehr ähnlich ist zum Beispiel. So ist meine Erfahrung so im Leben. Ich meine, Katalanisch ist genauso. Ich meine, ich kann immer noch Katalanisch sprechen, weil ich Spanisch noch spreche. Also es ist genauso mit Französisch oder Italienisch, Portugiesisch. Die Sprachen benutze ich zum Beispiel Katalanisch sehr wenig. Aber nicht wirklich nicht so häufig. Aber ich kann die Sprache immer noch so sprechen, quasi. Aber es ist mir eigentlich nicht so wichtig, wenn ich die Sprache ein bisschen schlechter rede. Das ist eigentlich nie, das ist mir eigentlich ein bisschen wurscht, muss ich sagen. Aber naja. Okay, mal gucken. Zdravo, Richard. Pozdrav od Skopje. Zdravo. Pozdrav, kako vo Skopje se? Dobro? Ajde. Hello, Richard. Greetings from Peru. I'm also passionate about language learning, okay, and language coach as well. Thank you very much for sharing your language learning passion with us. Thank you, Karina. I really appreciate it. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining. Let me see if I've got any other questions here. Let me see. Here we go. Okay, I'm trying to get back to where I am with the question. Thank you for answering. You're very welcome. Let me see. It's a great honor. I have a question. I'm studying English. Oh no, this is English for 2 years. Yes, I think I got that one right. Do excuse me while I look at what it's. Okay, I like the way you speak in Spanish. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you. Yeah, Spanish is I mean, there are 5 languages that we use at home. So I call them my home languages. So English, French, Spanish, Italian. Oh, sorry, Italian. English, French, Spanish, German, and Macedonian. They're the languages I use at home, and so yeah, they're quite comfortable for me to use. And then there are a number of other languages that I use for different reasons in different places. But yeah, they're my sort of home languages. So I feel fairly safe using them. Not that I'm going to speak them all perfectly 100% of the time. Even English, I mean, that's the first language I learned, and still I will say things slightly incorrectly every now and again. If I think my words come out faster than the way I'm thinking, I don't know. It's normal, right? As I say, sea level after only 2 years in Korean is genius territory. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Okay. Have you ever studied Greek? I've just started. Very enjoyable. Yes, I have. So I studied Greek for the first time in the Netherlands. I went to the Volksuniversiteit in Rotterdam and I studied Greek. I actually studied Greek so that I could practice my Dutch with Dutch speakers, because if you go to a class for Dutch in the Netherlands, people tend to speak English outside, and they're learning Dutch as well, so they don't feel so comfortable. Whereas if you go and you learn, like I was learning Greek, Lev Grieks, modern Greek, in English, and I just did a course in that, and I spoke Dutch all the time outside the class, which was great. And I learned a little bit of Greek, and then from there, in the Balkans, living in the Balkans, Greek is quite easy to practice because it's close by, it's in the Balkans too, so I got to use it quite a lot. And so yeah, I can get by in Greek. I'm not amazing at Greek, but I can definitely communicate. And when I go there, I don't tend to use English. I use Greek when I go to Greece, because I mean, look, unless I'm going to be talking about something extremely complicated in Greek, my Greek is there to be able to talk about most normal things. Oi, Richard. Oi, tudo bem? Let me see. Okay. Cool. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay. What do you think of Assimil? Assimil, yeah, I mean, I've used it for a few languages and it works well. Look, cards on the table. I am not a natural person who likes doing translations backwards and forwards, and that's part of the Assimil method. But, and this is the big but, I do recognize it's useful, and I do recognize that it works for a number of people. And I'll give you a very good example. Luca Lampariello. Look, Luca and I have known each other for many years now. We're friends. He's a lovely person. He's also a great language learner. He speaks a number of languages very, very well, and he absolutely uses this translation method. It's not my most comfortable or natural way of learning, but I recognize the utility of it, and I tend to kind of cheat it a little bit because I don't do it that often. But what I'll do if I use the Assimil method, then I'll read it and I'll translate it in my head. I'll see if I can do it, but I'm not a natural translator. What I mean by that is that actually, when I learn languages, I learn a word as another word for something else. It's either tied to an emotion or an object, because I don't think in language. I'm very conscious that I think in just thoughts and pictures, and so the words only come after. So particularly when I get to a level with a language where I'm just speaking, normally it's just because it's the audience I'm talking to. So, which is why I'm not very keen on these kind of dancing monkey routines of saying a word in like 50 languages for fun. It's not a natural thing that I would do, and it's not something I entertain usually either. I don't enjoy doing that kind of thing. Whereas, for example, if I'm at a party and one person speaks to me in German and then one person speaks to me in Dutch and another person in French and another person in whatever, that's fine. I will switch very easily and very comfortably. Sometimes it might be a bit, cause my head to explode, but I feel quite comfortable doing that usually. But I definitely don't go through, like, for example, a word. If you say to me, say coffee in 20 languages or even 10, I would struggle to do that because that's not me. And that's kind of, I think a translator would find that more easy to do than I do. More easier to do. You get what I mean? Okay. Tudo bem, obrigado. Com você. I'm speaking for you. Is speaking a language for you more of an art form similar to playing piano, guitar, etc.? It seems to me that some people tend to think of language as checkboxes and take away all the fun. Yeah, it is. I see language as an art form. It's definitely more like, for me, it's like a song that you sing and you learn to say the certain things. It's an interpretation of what you see and what you feel and what you think, and it's an expression of that. Sometimes it needs refining, and that's kind of what learning more vocabulary is. Refining of that to express exactly in a more concise and more precise way of what you actually have in your head. Yeah, that's a really nice thing. Yeah, absolutely, Eric. I'm with you. I try to associate words with concepts rather than words. Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting about thinking in pictures. Do you learn in a more visual way? So I don't particularly like it when somebody shows me a picture and then says, this is the word. I much prefer to see the word written, and I also sometimes prefer a translation of the word in the beginning. And the reason is that if you show me a picture of something, I don't necessarily know what that picture represents. Whereas sometimes having that a language translation can help me immediately know this is this. So, for example, I don't know, if you show me a picture of a type of bird, but the word you're trying to teach me is bird and not the type of bird it is, I would much rather see a translation of that than a picture of a random bird, particularly if the bird is a species of or a type of bird that I know. And then I wonder, is it actually bird, or do they mean eagle, or do they mean robin, or do they mean starling, or do they mean chaffinch, or do they mean sparrow, or do they mean something else? And I'm kind of like scratching my head thinking, or is it a seagull? You know what I mean? It's what is it? What is it you're trying to teach me? So I much prefer a very clear, definite way of learning the words. But what I find is that the meanings, the translations fall away very quickly. And as I progress in a language, actually the explanations of what it means and the descriptions, I tend to find out through that language. So there are words, for example, in Macedonian, that's my main home language, that I can't tell you in English. I just don't know. I don't know those words because they only exist in that context. Some of them, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, we're talking almost half of my life has been speaking Macedonian as a home language. It's a long time to be speaking a language. How challenging do you think it will be to start learning German for someone who is Spanish native speaker, speaks English very well, and French and Italian at an intermediate level? Karina, I think it's possible, absolutely. I mean, it just takes time. German word order is the thing that people often find challenging, but it just takes exposure and time. But yeah, I mean, if you speak English and you speak French, they definitely help with German. When I learned German, I spoke Swedish, and I found that was a big help. But French, for example, for some of the longer words in German, some of the words that German speakers themselves struggle with, it can be a big advantage, knowing that kind of Latin vocabulary. Ewan, for me, Korean was the fastest I've ever learned a language, but even after reaching fluency, it has taken more years for the things I know to become really internalized. Even fluency isn't the end. Absolutely, and totally with you on that, Ewan. Fluency isn't the end. It really isn't. That's completely true. So it takes time. I mean, look, I've been speaking, as I say, Macedonian for 17 years as a home language, right? It's a long time to speak a language at home, a long time, believe me. And even now, there are things I still don't know. I still learn things, okay? But at the same time, there are many circumstances and occasions where I'll know something that somebody who just speaks or has been speaking that language all their lives don't know. That happens on a fairly regular basis. So there's kind of a weird thing of, yeah, I mean, I don't struggle for words in Macedonian at all. So I can express myself really more than adequately in many contexts. But I still learn things, and I still have things where I'm kind of, is that what I'd say in that context? And the same as I sometimes do in English. Even my own language, it's normal. But yeah, the languages you're learning, absolutely, I agree completely. There's new methods for learning language. The teacher will draw a picture on the board and make it more comprehensible. Yeah, I mean, look, any tools you can use that work for the learner are great, so go for it. You use birds as an example of when it comes to vocabulary and categories, and I love it. Thank you, Israel. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, birds for me are really interesting. Why Macedonian? It seems a relatively unusual language to learn as a native English speaker. That's why Macedonian. So there we go. Yeah. Even Richard taking word order. Is Macedonian the same as Greek? So okay, there is so the region of Macedonia in Greece is they actually do have kind of an accent and a dialect. I want to say dialect. Greeks in mainland Greece is fairly standard, but there is a dialect spoken in that part of Greece that's Macedonia in Greece. There is a dialect, and they're known for having this this L, which is very similar to the Slavic L, and other parts of Greece actually make fun of that, and they say they sound like the Smurfs because they say lol 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 lol, and there are some words and similarities, and you certainly see words that are used in that part of Greece that are not used in the south, for example. So yes, there are some similarities. There are also, if you look at older speakers of Macedonian, when I talk about Macedonian, the Slavic language that I speak, there, for example, it takes time. So in Greek, you'd say "thelichrono." It wants time, I guess. And you can say "sakavreme" in Macedonian, but it's not standard in Macedonian to say "sakavreme." It's a colloquialism, and people would say you shouldn't say that, but it is something that people use. Older speakers of the language use it, for example. But that's directly Greek. I mean, that's a translation of the Greek as well. So you see it in both languages. So there are things like that you see. There are also words. I mean, most of the sort of colloquialisms actually tend to be more from Turkish. So we have like over 6,000 Turkish words in Macedonian that often also have in turn come from Arabic or Persian, and yeah, super interesting. They're my favorite words. I love them. But then they tend to have also a Slavic version, not always, but sometimes. So yeah, words like, for example, jam. Jam is a word for a window. It's also, you see that word also in Romanian, but we also have the word prozorec, which is the Slavic word, and then you also have pencere, which is used in the south, in Bitola, in the south of the country. They will use pencere for that, and that's a word that's used in Turkish for window. Jam as well is another Turkish word, but not. I don't know how depends on the words, but yeah, there are lots of words like that. For example, most of the words that start with a j sound, we have words like jep, and that's in, you see that in Greek too, tojepi, and then you have words like ocak, which is the word for a chimney, which is also from Turkish, and in it's the month of January in Turkish as well. But then in Greek, it's zaki is the word for chimney as well. Um, there are a number of words like this that you see all over the Balkans, and they go into different languages. So anyway, I'm going to have to run because it's nearly an hour and this is going to close, and I'm going to have to leave because otherwise they're going to get angry at me, and I don't want to be mean to the lovely Icelanders who are super, super nice to me when I'm here. So I am going to disappear. Again, make sure you follow me, make sure you give me a like, make sure you come and ask me questions whenever you like. I'm very, very happy. And you can join me now on TikTok. So I am now officially on TikTok. So please feel free to come and join me, ask me questions, and I will see you next week. Same time, maybe a different place, maybe not here, but I will see you same time next week. Take care. Happy language learning. Have a lovely, 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 lovely week. And I will see you soon. Thank you for joining me and for keeping me company as ever. It was an absolute pleasure. Take care. See you soon.